Hello and welcome to a new oXygen XML webinar. This is the last webinar dedicated to oXygen version 17, and today we will focus on authoring XML documents on the web. We started 5 weeks ago with a webinar that provided an overview of oXygen 17. Then we highlighted the user interface improvements, the XML quick fixes, and the new XML refactoring functionality. And last week we covered the data-related additions. The recordings of all these oXygen version 17 webinars are available on our website, and you can find them in the past events section. My name is George Bina, and I'm one of the founders of Syncrosoft, the company that develops oXygen XML Editor. And I invited today my colleague Christian, our project manager for the oXygen WebApp platform. Hi, Christy.
Hello, George. Hello, everyone.
To join me for this webinar, and together we'll try to show you the current status of in-browser XML authoring using the oXygen WebApp. I will focus on the user perspective, and Christy will focus more on the developer perspective. Before we start, here it is some useful information. As I mentioned before, we recorded previous webinars, so we will record also this one, and we'll make the recording available in a couple of days. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the questions panel in your GoToWebinar interface, and there's no need to wait until the end of the webinar, because some of my colleagues are also online and they will be able to answer your questions as we go. At the end of the webinar, we have a dedicated Q&A section when we will respond live to your questions. In case you use Twitter, you can mark your webinar related messages with the oXygen XML hashtag, so we can easily identify those messages. And that is another channel that you can use for questions. I will start with a quick look at the options we provide for web-based XML editing. Then I will show you the oXygen WebApp in action with a few examples. And after that, Christy will take over, and he will present you more on the integration options, sample workflows, and how you can, what are the steps to get you started with the oXygen WebApp. And as I mentioned, at the end we have the questions and answer section. So oXygen provides an SDK that allows integrating the XML authoring technology in custom applications, in your own applications. One part of this SDK is the oXygen author component. This is a Java component that you can use in your own Java application. And we provide samples showing how this can be used to build a desktop application or a Java applet. A number of our content management systems partners are using the oXygen author component to build Java applets and to provide web-based XML editors as part of their integrated solutions. It is possible to build also a desktop application around the author component and then distribute that over the web through Java Web Start. But this is a less integrated solution, as the application will run in its own window, not within the browser. Also, part of the oXygen SDK, we have the oXygen XML WebApp. This is a web application platform that allows including the oXygen XML editing technology into a web application. And the oXygen XML WebApp is the focus of our today's webinar. So why we developed the oXygen XML WebApp, taking into account the existing options with the applet, for example. And there are two main reasons for that. We wanted to provide a lightweight XML editing solution that will run across platforms and devices. That means including mobile phones and tablets, while the existing options that we have, Applet and Java Web Start, do not work on mobile devices. And the processing in these cases is client side. The oXygen Web App is lightweight on the client. It is basically just a remote display that communicates back to the server and uses HTML5 and JavaScript, so it runs on any device, a desktop, smartphones, or tablets. The heavy work is done on the server side, where we reuse the Java-based oXygen core technology. This is very important, as we didn't want to reinvent all the development and customizations on a new platform. So an important goal was to be able to reuse the existing functionality that we built in oXygen for the last 14 years. So we support validation with all XML schema languages, not only XML schema and DTDs, but also RelaxNG, Schematron, and VDL. And we managed to reuse most of the functionality we provide for oXygen Desktop, including inline actions, form controls, existing oXygen customizations for different XML languages, what we call frameworks, and we already have such frameworks for DITA, DocBook, DI, XHTML, and so on, as well as oXygen plugins, the most important ones being the CMS connector plugins. Here you can see a diagram with the web app architecture, where the web app application runs on a server, and when you connect with the browser, it will serve HTML5 plus JavaScript and HTML5 plus JavaScript interface to allow you to edit an XML document. On the server side, you can reuse oXygen frameworks, so not only the built-in DITA, DocBook, TI, and so on frameworks, but your own frameworks as well. If you customized oXygen for some XML language, or if you further customize the DITA support or DocBook support and so on. And plugins to provide specific functionality for an XML language or to connect to an XML repository. As I mentioned, as it is the case with the author component, the oXygen Web App is part of the oXygen SDK. So it should be integrated into an application. However, we provide a number of samples as part of the SDK, and we also set up a test web app demo, a test server, so you can use that to see how the web app works. We also provide a plugin for oXygen, for oXygen Desktop, that allows you to start a local server with a web app application that provides editing access, editing support for editing your local files, and that is integrated to use the existing oXygen plugins and frameworks that are installed in that oXygen Desktop. The starting point for the online test server is this page oxygenxml.com/webapp. So if we open this in a browser, so oxygenxml.com/webapp, you will get to this page where you can find more information about the Oxygen web app, including this link to try it online. So if you follow this link, you will get to this page where you have a number of sample documents here, as well as these two buttons here that allow you to open your own documents from your Dropbox or Google Drive accounts. So let's use one of the examples to explore the main user interface. So let's say we click on this link, and then we have a URL here that basically triggers the web app, which is this base URL demomobile.html, and passes to this web app, it passes a few parameters like the URL pointing to the file that is open, which is this gardenia.xml file. Show save equals true, that means to show the save button. Data map equals and points to the root data map. In this case, the root data map in case of data is used for key resolution, for example, and then the author. And we can even change, let's say, so we can change the author equals George, so that any changes that we will make to the document and if we record the track changes in the document, then they are stored with my name, let's say with George, right? So as you can see, the first part that I want to show you is that initially we developed the Oxygen web app on mobile devices. Now in version 17 we moved to be both desktop friendly and mobile friendly. So we provide an adaptive layout, and now you can see that this is basically desktop friendly, but as you resize everything changes. The toolbar does not take that much space. The file name disappears, then some actions disappear. Sorry, and you can turn off also the side views. So basically, if you will be on a mobile device, on a phone, this will be the layout that you will get. And of course, on that device, you will have swipe to get the side views and to show and hide the side views, so not have this split button there, and it will also be, you know, all the mobile friendly part will work in that case. So as I mentioned, we support change tracking, annotations, comments, or being stored as processing instructions in the same way as Oxygen Desktop does. And now if we make a change here, we can show the review panel, and you can see the author name George that added this, and we can accept reject changes. So let's say we reject this. If we set track changes off, then all the changes that we make on the document will not be recorded anymore. To change the structure of the documents, you can use the toolbar, for instance, that provides specific actions for the document type that you are editing, in this case for data. You can control what actions will be available to the user as part of the framework customizations, and the same actions that are defined for oXygen desktop are made available in this user interface. So let's say we want to insert a table, then we can do this with the insert table action from the user interface. We got a table inserted, and then we can also use the contextual menu to insert another column, for instance, or if we want, we can also select, let's say, 2 cells and say join row cells, and now we have these 2 cells span, these cells spanning over 2 columns, right? So you can create any complex table structure as you need. oXygen for creating structure will give you also, when you press enter, you get also this code inside these proposals with the available elements, and you can just type to select one of them. And then you have also this attributes panel, which gives you access to all the attributes of that element. So let's say we set the type for this node to other, and now you see there is a validation issue, and if we look here, we see that node with type other should have also other type attribute set. This is part of the schematron validation, and I mentioned that we support the same validation engines as oXygen because that runs on the server side, so we have all that support. So now let's say we set also the other type attribute to hint maybe, and then the error disappears basically, and we have a valid node here. On the main toolbar, we also have undo, redo actions. In this case, because it's read-only, or you can write to this sample file that we provide, the save action basically will provide you a download option, so you will be able to download the content. Here you can trigger the validation on request if you want to, and the search will automatically show the find replace side view, where you can start search, for instance, for something and replace it. So the terms will be highlighted, and you can browse between them. And also here we have the author name presented, and with this you can hide and show the side views. So that's the main part of the user interface. And let's take a look also at the WebApp plugin for oXygen. So this is the other option to test how the oXygen WebApp works. If I move to my oXygen instance, you can see that the WebApp plugin contributes this button on the toolbar that allows you to start a local Tomcat server with a WebApp sample that integrates with oXygen, reusing the frameworks and the plugins already available in your oXygen installation. So if we, let's say we open a file and we start the WebApp plugin, So this is the window that presents these options to open this URL. And this URL will point to the document that I have open in oXygen. So if I click open now, we see this troubleshooting topic opened in the browser in Firefox. Now, if we change, let's say we want a different rendering, and then oXygen provides this guided authoring support with hints and inline actions that are enabled as layers. We covered this in the data webinar last week, for example. So these actions allow me to create the structure more easily and to see each element, how I should use each element. So now if we open the topic again, we can see the same user interface. So if we want to enter a short description, then we can just click on the short description and we get an explanation here, a hint on what we should enter here, and the short description is inserted in the document. Also for the troubleshooting topic, it's very easy now to discover what elements, what markup structure you can enter in this document. Like for a specific condition, you can provide one or more solutions. So you can enter multiple trouble solutions, and each solution will have a cause or multiple causes, right? So you can enter that multiple times, and then one or more remedies. Again, this can be entered multiple times. And for each remedy you can insert title, responsible party, steps. So now steps, you see the background, orange background means it's required in this case, and so on. So this provides a nicer user interface, but the idea here is that the same customization, the same functionality that you have in oXygen desktop using inline hints in the document, inline actions, works also in the web app. I forgot to mention that the web app plugin also provides this QR code, which basically encodes this URL here. And this is useful if you want to test how the web app works on a tablet or on a smartphone, because you can just quickly scan this code on your mobile device, assuming it is in the same local network as your computer, and then you will open this document, the current document from oXygen, on your phone or on your tablet. So you can see exactly how the user interface will work on that device. So for data, I showed you the inline hints and inline actions working, the data-specific toolbar and contextual actions. We also support recently embedded MathML and SVG rendering, and a data map to provide a context. Another example, so oXygen is not hard-coded to data or DOBook. These are just default customizations. And another example here is an XML, a custom XML language, basically, that encodes the information available in the content in the language of content strategy book, which is actually not only a book, it's also a website that has more content that you can find in the book, and it's also a deck of cards. So some of the content is published also on this deck of cards. So let me show you also this in, so a topic from this book will look like this in oXygen desktop. And if we open the URL to this in the web app, we can see, these inline actions that allow me to see the content that will go on the deck of cards, the content that will go in the book, and you see there's no picture here or no Facebook information, no additional resources. And while if I switch to the full mode, I get also picture, LinkedIn and Facebook information, additional resources, audio, and so on. So the entire set of content. We can also use these show actions to get these actions in line, and also access to attributes. So instead of editing a link, the reference of a link in the attributes panel, this href, we can edit that directly within the content. And it's very easy also to create additional structure and then just fill in this content. Or if you select something and you want to turn this into a link, then you can just set the href attribute, and that's it, right? So you turn this into a link. So very nice and easy to use interface, and making all these buttons directly available in the user interface makes it also very easy to use on mobile devices. And the last example I want to show is a European Broadcast Union time text document, which is basically a subtitles. And let me open this link so you can see also this kind of user interface. Here we have defined some style information. So for instance, red on black, if we click edit, we get access to these are basically in the XML document, there are attributes, and the color red here is used dynamically to style this preview here. And also here we're in the subtitles part, if we want to edit the styles, let's say, then we can say red on black, and as we set this style information, then this automatically changes. So it's an example where the web app is basically dynamically, the view of the document is styled dynamically. So hope I'm right in time to end the first part, the user perspective, let's say. And now I will give control to my colleague Christy to show you the developer perspective. So hi again, Christy.
Hello, I am Christian, the oXygen XML WebApp Product Manager. I'm convinced that George managed to impress you with the editing experience offered by WebApp. I'm here to present you how to bring this technology inside your company, how to integrate it with existing systems, tools, and workflows. In this second part of the webinar, I will walk through some of the integration steps that you may need to implement. I set up a couple of integration prototypes to illustrate each of the approaches. Some of them are available on our demo website that George showed you before. Others will be published as soon as we iron out the final details. The first step you need to perform is to connect the editor with the files that you need to edit. The simplest case is the one in which you do not have to do any integration. It simply works out of the box. This is the case for file repositories with WebDAV interface. And there are a lot of them, ranging from CMSs and code versioning systems to web servers and even online storage services. I will show you how this works with our demo server and box.com online storage service, which offers a WebDAV interface. I will switch to our demo website, which has an interface in which you enter the URL of the file you want to edit. In our case, it is a data file. This is the URL of the file stored in the box.com server. We need to prefix it with webdav- in order for the web app to properly identify it as a webdav resource. We also need to provide the context data map that will be used to resolve keys. Now I open this in WebApp and it asks me to authenticate with box.com. I entered my username and password. Here is the topic, which is loaded from box.com. We can check it here. They offer a preview of the file, so it's the same Gerbera file. Okay, and I can even change something to it, modified. Yeah, it's a little typo. And I can also save it to the server. Look, the document is saved, and we can switch to the box.com interface to confirm this. They say that there is a new version of the file available, and we are getting the preview of that file. Okay, so this is a support that works out of the box, and you can test it on our demo website. We also have integrations with Google Drive and Dropbox. They are also available on our online demo server, and the source code is available on GitHub, so you can integrate them in your own deployment to use inside your company. Another scenario for file access is to open any kind of web resources. For example, GitHub serves XML files stored in a repository as plain text by using the raw interface. I will show you in a minute. I set up a test repository for this webinar with our flowers sample. So we can go to one of the topics and choose the raw mode for GitHub, and it will give us an URL on which we can access the content of the file. We can use this URL. We can use this URL and open it in the demo server, which is located on our main website. Okay, so I can load this. And you see that the image, which is in another folder located relative to the XML file, it's already opened. Everything is great, except that the HTTP interface of the GitHub does not allow saving. So if you try saving the file, it will actually download the content of the file. So in this case, we made use of an open source JavaScript library which allowed us to actually commit the changed file content to GitHub. So I set up a local web server with a web app, and I can open this URL in my local server. You see it's stored on localhost, and I can change something in the title. And you see here we have a GitHub icon, and it will actually commit the change on a new branch. I can press commit and check what happens on GitHub. It says that there is a new branch created, and it has if we switch to this view, it's one commit ahead of the master. Okay, so this is another scenario in which for read access you use the HTTP protocol, for write, for saving the documents, you use a JavaScript library. Another use case assumes that you can just feed some XML into the editor and get XML out of it just by using JavaScript. I set up a minimal example which allows you to drag a file from your local computer, edit it, and download the modified file. All the loading and saving of the file are performed in JavaScript. Okay, so I open the web app. This is also on my local web server. It asks me to drop some file there in order to edit. I can choose one of the files, and it is available here. I can make some change and then save, and you can see that the downloaded file contains my changes. Okay, this approach has a drawback in that you can use it only for XML vocabularies that do not have external references. These references include data conrefs and images. However, it happens to be the case that a lot of document types do not have external references, like form-based documents or the movie subtitles examples that George presented earlier. The most flexible integration method uses the Java-based server-side API. It works with arbitrary file repositories and external references in the XML content. We adopted this approach for our Google Drive and Dropbox integrations, and we made the code open source so that you don't start from scratch. So you can take that code as an example and start an integration with a CMS that does not have HTTP interface or has a more complex interface to access files. In this approach, you basically have to implement an open connection method that receives the session ID of the user that makes the request and the URL itself. It should provide an input stream for loading files and an output stream for saving files at that URL. File browsing is a useful optional feature to add to your integration. It is a JavaScript widget that you may want to implement in order to let the user pick an image to insert or an XML document to reference. You can see it in action in our Dropbox integration, which is available on our website. So here there is a Dropbox icon. You can press it and then choose some XML file on Dropbox and open it in the web app. After it is loaded, you can press the Insert Image Reference button on the toolbar, and the Dropbox file chooser appears again to let you choose the image that you want to insert. And then you have to press the Choose button. This whole functionality is implemented as a plugin for the web app. It's nothing built in, so you can do the same for another file repository. We are working on using this widget for inserting content references and in other places also. We are also working on such a browser for WebDAV servers. The workflow integration is another problem that you face when trying to use WebApp. The simplest type of workflow is a sequential one. It is basically a human which ensures that no editing conflicts occur. There is no integration in this case, just a person that takes care to avoid editing conflicts. A more powerful workflow is the branching one. This workflow is very effective at collecting contribution from external sources that are not necessarily aware of each other, like your users, your partners, or authorities. Basically, every contributor edits in isolation, and at the end of the day, someone in your company will need to integrate all the changes. I can show you an example of this in our integration with GitHub. So previously I made a change to one of the files in this repository, and it is committed on a separate branch. And now I assume to be the person which needs to integrate the change. So GitHub offers an interface that allows me to compare the modified file with the original one and to accept the change if it is reasonable. So it's only a change in the title. I can create a pull request out of this, and then since I'm the owner of the repository, I can also merge the pull request. Okay, and now if I go back to that file, we can see that the modification appeared. The locking workflow works well when you send the editing link to a group of people that can coordinate so that they will not make conflicting changes to the document. From an implementation point of view, it requires a Java plugin that listens to all document opened and closed events and sends a notification if the document is opened by multiple users, so that the users can talk to each other and find a way to avoid conflicts. The live concurrent workflow. This is the holy grail of multi-user contribution. However, with a topic-based editing strategy as promoted by DITA, the case where multiple users happen to edit the same document is extremely rare. We plan to implement two partial solutions for this. In the first one, a user is the presenter during a video conference and writes down the conclusions of the meeting. And have no editing permissions. Another use case is multiple users editing in different parts of the same document, and if they happen to change inside the same paragraph, let's say, one of the edits will be rejected. Okay, let's talk now about what it takes to implement such an integration. Well, this strongly depends on the integration requirements. It may require Java development if you want to use one of our server-side extension points. However, these Java integrations are very similar to oXygen standalone integration. It's basically the same API, the same Java API. So if you have experience in this area, it will be very helpful. However, we provide support by pointing you to the right API for the job and the best architecture of the extension, and with whatever questions that might arise during the development. You may also use our JavaScript API to customize the client side and to provide some new GUI components for your users. Okay, now it is time for you to start the integration. To get started, you need to go to our website, oxygenxml.com. We have a resources section with an oXygen SDK entry, and here you need to navigate to oXygen XML Author WebApp integration. In order to start the integration, you need to create an SDK project using the instructions provided here. You will need to install and configure Maven to use our Maven repository. All the steps are provided in this tutorial, and then you'll have to run this command to generate the sample project. I performed these steps and imported the resulting project in Eclipse, and I ended up with a bunch of projects. The project of interest here being the oXygen sample web app. You can see there are also a lot of plugin samples. Some of them are used by the standalone, some of them are used both by the standalone and the web app distributions of oXygen. some of them are used only by the web app. For example, this WebDAV plugin is the implementation of our WebDAV support. So you can look at the source and also extend this to your scenario. We also have a bundle frameworks project that contains all the default frameworks provided by oXygen, and you can also plug in yours here and will be loaded by the web app. And yeah, in order to start, you also need to configure the licensing details. Basically, oXygen web app needs a license server or a license servlet in order to run. You need to have a floating license. If you want to just just evaluate the oXygen web app, you can contact our support email address to ask for an evaluation license, and the details that you receive will need to be entered in this license.properties file. Afterwards, you can just run the web app using the run as run on server action in Eclipse, and then the main page appears with the location of the document and of the data map, and just press load and the web app is launched locally. So you can also test the web app this way, and if you make changes to some of the HTML files or JavaScript files, it will reload them if you just refresh the page in your browser. Okay, now for more details about the API, you can just search our website for Java doc to find our Java API documentation and JS doc, which points you to the JavaScript documentation for the web app. It also has a couple of tutorials for certain aspects, and we will improve this over time. Okay, we also have a section in our user manual about web app integration, so you have to go to resources, documentation, then to our web help, and then there is this chapter customizing oXygen XML web app. And yeah, you can find here several how-tos, some options for customization, and so on. You can also find the web app related projects on GitHub. Just search for the oXygen XML organization. Okay, and inside this organization you can search for web app, and this is a project, web app storage services integration, that contains the source code of our Google Drive and Dropbox integration, and you can also get inspiration from those or use them as they are. Okay, that's all for my part. Thank you for listening. I will switch back to George for the closing words and the Q&A session. Bye bye.
Thank you, Christy. And let's see, maybe you can still keep the presenter role for a while. Maybe there is some need to show something, and then I will take the presenter at the end.
Okay.
So we had a good number of questions actually. One of them is whether it is possible to integrate with Bitbucket.
We just provided an example of GitHub integration. I guess that Bitbucket also offers or read-only HTTP access and has some kind of API that allows one to commit a file. And so the answer is probably yes, but we need to investigate a little.
In general, the web app can be integrated with any repository as long as there is some possibility to write and read from that repository. Now it's just a matter of how difficult that is or not. Anyway, the examples that Christy presented will be made available as part of the SDK pretty soon, so you can get, use them as a starting point. Another question is about scalability. How many authors can work through the, well, the question is website, but probably it says web app, through the web app over the network. And do we need additional floating licenses? That was the question.
So from our tests, you can connect around 100 users on a server, but you can also use multiple servers. As we do in our online demo, we have a couple of servers that are spinned off when someone connects, and it works. Regarding the floating licenses, oXygen WebApp works only with floating licenses, and at least for the moment they are not compatible with existing oXygen standalone licenses.
Yeah, so also on the licensing side we are thinking, and if there will be more interest in that, also about a subscription model. Another question was about Markdown editing in the oXygen web app, and the answer is that we do not provide a visual editor for Markdown. We have some ideas on how that can be implemented, and maybe be able to use schematron to enforce some structural rules or different business rules on the Markdown documents, but we will see how that idea will evolve. I cannot promise any when that will be available. We'll have to see how things develop. How can one find through the web app what keys are available to a topic? That was another question.
Okay, so we have a plan to implement the insert keyref action, and that action will probably contain an interface to browse through the existing keys that are available to insert, and it is on our short-term list. We currently do not have such support.
Another question was about the hints that I presented for data, and the question was, can these hints, may these hints be generated from annotations from an XSD file? And the answer is yes, and part of this idea with inline hints, there is also support for editing Saxon configuration files, and in that case the hints are generated from an XML schema file for Saxon configurations. So it just uses an XSLT style sheet to extract that information, and then it generates the CSS to use those hints extracted from the XML schema. Another question is it possible to start the web app using oXygen as an Eclipse plugin? And I guess this refers to the WebApp plugin. And the WebApp plugin is developed for oXygen Desktop. So if you are using Eclipse, maybe you can use the SDK, generate the Maven project, and then you can start, as Christy presented, start the web app from there, and any changes that you make will be reflected in those projects, will be reflected in the web app. The oXygen license allows you to use both the Eclipse plugin and the standalone version. So that's another option. Install a standalone version side by side with your Eclipse plugin, and then use that to start and test the oXygen web app. So another question was, is there another way to launch the web app other than the toolbar button? And I think Christy covered that, showing how you can create a project, and then you can start the web app from that project. It is also easy to try something if you use our test server, just by setting the URL to point to your documents, or you can place your documents on your Google Drive or Dropbox account, and then just browse and open the documents from there. But you cannot control in this case what frameworks are set. However, you can set the CSS in the XML document, and so if you have the XML document and the CSS, then you can provide the functionality that you want. Basically, the subtitle example does not have a framework in the web app, so what you've seen was only created with the CSS, so with the reference to the CSS file. Has anyone integrated with an SVN server? We have one that has HTTPS access. Should I expect that to allow my users to get to the SVN file via the oXygen web app?
Okay, this may be possible similarly to how we did with GitHub. On the other hand, there are some SVN servers that provide WebDAV interface, so you can also save the files in SVN. We performed some tests with Subversion Edge from CollabNet, and it worked this way.
So I'm not sure I understand exactly this question. Does what seamlessly SVN as alternative to CMS or GitHub?
I don't understand either, but I don't know, as long as you choose the right connectors, WebApp can work with any file repository. That's why I also chose the term file repository instead of CMS or something, because you can also use it with file code versioning system like SVN or GitHub.
So another question is whether web app on the client side and WebDAV on the server side needs to be used. And the answer is that the WebDAV is just an example repository for which there is a ready-to-use connector available. So basically the integration work is very small. It's really reduced. It's just like, just getting the sample project up and running on your server, and then you are able to access content from any WebDAV repository.
There is just that prefixing with a WebDAV minus keyword that you need to do to the WebDAV URLs, and that's all.
So another question is, now I would like to provide some data documents to some selected people for review. How can I do this via the web app? And
well, you can choose a place to store that file, and if you happen to be in one of the scenarios that I presented, then you can use those approaches. I think right now the simplest version will be to put them on Dropbox and to share the file with the other people, and that's all. Or put it on the GitHub and have those people. Yeah, but you say you only want some selected people. Maybe create a private repository and give access only to those people. Something along these lines.
And a last question, because I think we are 1 minute after the hour. When working on a project with many files using the web app, how would you search the file set? And well, the web app is just a component, basically. It's not a solution for, it's part of the SDK, and if you want something, you know, that searches, manages all resources, integrity checks and all other functionality, that will be part of a CMS or of a larger integration of the web app. And we have a good number of our CMS partners that already work on integrating this editing technology into their solutions. And basically what Christy mentioned at some point, that you can plug into the web app an interface to browse for resources. The CMS will be able to plug, so that interface provided by a CMS or an integration can offer a search rather than browse, or both search and browse support.
Yeah, actually having a CMS I don't know, having a solution from a CMS which integrates with the web app is yet another option to those presented before, and there are several CMSs working on integrations, so stay tuned.
Last question is, how about email notification for workflow? Again, this part is outside the web app itself, being part of a larger solution that CMS or that will provide this kind of functionality like workflow and so on. So I think that concludes our presentation today. Thank you for joining us. And before we end, I would like to mention that we have a number of upcoming events where you can meet us again, either virtually at some webinars or in person at a few conferences. So we'll present a webinar for guiding authors towards the creation of intelligent content, hosted by Scott Abel, the content wrangler. Then later on in September, we have a webinar hosted by CIDM, the organizers of the data conferences, with a presentation called Data Glass, Perceive Everything as Data, where we will show the dynamic content conversion through URLs that we have in oXygen 17. And then we'll be at Information Development World in San Jose, California, at TC World, where we have 3 presentations in the conference program, a product session and the technology panel. We are organizing again this year the second edition of Data Open Toolkit Day, where we will have the main Data OT developers, and it was a very successful event last year. That's why we decided to have the second edition this year with many Data Open Toolkit users. And after that will be at Data Europe. So I'm looking forward to meeting you again in the future, and thank you again for attending our webinar. Goodbye.
Bye bye.